attending this conference in the it's so Bernard is professor of general and comparative literature at the Law. Since 2019, has been president of the European Society of Comparative Literature and the secretary. Now has been president of the Groupement Scientifique, et des sociétés since 2021, and he was in the French and Comparative Literature Department of his university between 2012 and 2017. He is the editor of the series Perspective with Comparatistes and me, Asun Lopez Varela, at the series CompLit InterArt published by Groupement for the European Society of Comparative Literature. Franco is a member of the editorial board of various journals, including the Revue de Littérature Comparée, CompLit, Noria, Revue de Littérature Comparée. Additionally, he is a member of the International Advisory Board of the International Journal of Comparative Cultural Studies, and his research focuses on European Romanticisms, the practical language of experience, questions of dramaturgy, and the relationship between literature and aesthetics. And his publication includes the Despotisme, Débats, modèle, tragique, allemand, la littérature comparée, Histoire, and modèle. So thank you very much, Gunnar, for hosting us and for going to deliver this wonderful topic, the landscape as a visual fiction about literary knowledge.
Thank you very much to you, Asun, for this very kind introduction. We have got already two very different lectures from Beatrice and from Brigitte, and it's maybe a paradox, but I think I will stay in the middle of it. Landscape is a canonical literary representation in narrative genre, in poetry, especially in poetry, and even in drama, but it is rarely limited to being merely a setting for plots or meditation. In his famous article on l'effet de réel, Roland Barthes, using the example of the plot, showed that static objects without any meaning in real life can hardly do without symbolic significance in literature. The same applies to landscape. Thinking about landscape in literature can therefore be approached from two angles. Firstly, the question how the authors think about landscape in the creation of work, but it's also a question of approaching the work and understanding it through the form, place, and function that landscape holds in it. These two approaches embrace respectively the authors and the readers' points of view. Nevertheless, they share a common interest in the meaning of landscape in the work and its relevance to the construction of meaning. The more general question of space in the work is, in particular, the object of geocriticism, the theory of which Bertrand Westphal has undertaken to elaborate. The more specific question of landscape raises not only its function in the work, but also its limits and meaning. How far is the landscape a garden, for example? Is it frame or content, or does it still involve consciousness? If it's pure state, what about the poetry of seasons? This is the question raised, for example, by Handels's poem L'Arme, written in the spring of 1872. The poetic subject is set in the landscape. Je buvais, accroupi dans quelques rivières, entouré de tendres bois noisetiers, par un brouillard d'après-midi tiède et vert. The hyperlation of tone underlines the link between landscape and subjectivity and gives spring the significance of what Rosa has called le printemps de la vie, the springtime of life. For the sake of lightness, as Verlaine had recommended, the poem uses an uneven verse, the syllable, 11 syllables. Cambon had proposed two versions of this poem. However, in the third stanza, which introduces temporality all the more clearly as it depicts the transformation of the landscape underlined by the play of colors, a difference appears in the rhythm. The third version maintains the handicap syllable. Puis, l'orage changea le ciel jusqu'au soir. Ce furent des pays noirs, des lacs, des perches, des colonnades sous la nuit bleue, des gares. The passage from light to dark, from green to blue and black, from nature to city, from calm to tumult, describes time in the state of the landscape. In the other version, the second verse changes and reinforces the break by moving from the handicap syllable, 11 syllables, to the 9 syllables. Ce furent des pays noirs, des perches. So he removed the lack. Place. The rhythmic break is reinforced here by the semantic break. How can we understand the presence of fish in the verse if lakes are no longer mentioned? The landscape, purely symbolic, is thus essentially linked to the human. It replaces in Rimbaud's poem the tear that only appears on the title. It is not only the state that contains time, it can also be considered as an exteriority referring to an interiority. A well-known example is the Moor landscape in King Lear, which forms the scenic liberation of the character's madness. At the same time, Shakespeare's Moor cannot be dissociated from the disintegration of the kingdom that is at the heart of the plot, and which itself designates the dislocation of a world order whose nature is essentially moral and not spatial. Shakespeare's example has given rise to numerous rewrites. In Huysmans' novel Là-bas, there, published in 1891, the plot revolves around Gilles de Retz, the companion of Jeanne d'Arc, with an emphasis on satanism. Huysmans crafted a double intertext, that of the English Gothic novel and its association of landscape description and fantastic plot, and that of Shakespeare, since the novel depicts the Moor as infernal. Another variation on King Lear is represented by Ionesco's Le Roi se meurt, the king is dying, where the pronominal form in French is reminiscent of the English progressive form. In Ionesco's work, the dislocation of the landscape and of the king overlap, echoing the chaos depicted by Shakespeare. Still, Ionesco also superimposes two intertexts, grafting both onto Shakespeare's in the Fall of the House of Usher, a short story that combines the dislocation of the house and of the characters. In each case, the redoubled intertext is a sign of the presence of a critical discourse. What's more, in each of these examples, the character is associated with his space through a relationship of identity or similarity. In Rimbaud's work, as in Shakespeare's, this is the case for Ophelia's relationship with a river, which associated with song, because in Shakespeare the space of lyrics in tragedy, while Rimbaud in his poem proclaims Ophelia's belonging to the lyric register. However, It was with Romanticism that the function of the literary landscape as a representation of state of mind became a cliché. What John Wallstein in the third volume of his modern painters might have formed pathetic policy to criticize romantic sentimentalism. Romanticism thus inflected and systematized the function that Shakespeare had assigned to the Moor in King Lear. The text often associated with this poetic use of landscape is Lamartine's famous Lac, the lake. The poem published in 1820 in Méditation poétique is the contemplation of the Lac du Bouffay. Lamartine, in August 1870, had been unable to meet Julie Charles there, who had died of species. Indeed, the lake is both a projection of the poet's melancholy and a manifestation of the passage of time. Still, this standard comments on Lamartine's own famous poem leave aside the intertextuality with English lyricists. In 1798, in particular, Samuel Coleridge, William Wordsworth, and Robert Southey published their lyrical ballads, at first anonymously. For Lamartine, the lake is therefore the expression of an individual experience, but it is also the mark of a literary commonplace, enabling him to associate the image of the lake with the lyrical draw. Finally, he associates lyric poetry with meditation, echoing another cliché of Romanticism, illustrated by the place held by the landscape in the work of a painter like Caspar David Friedrich, for example, in his famous Wonder about the Sea of Fog in 1818. Landscape has an identity function here, describing the text in the lyric draw, and this often cuts across poetic form. A place as complex and ambiguous as Clyde's Prince Philip from Hamburg paradoxically opens with a landscape scene. The prince, in the space of the garden, had a somnambulistic dream dominated by a mysterious beloved woman. The Didascalia describes the prince as withdrawn out, with naked head, that is to say, without his helmet, not in the position of a warrior. A lyrical character, he is here outside the literary space of presence, represented at the same time by the character of the elector associated with the space of the castle. The opening of the play thus includes a reflection on the author's choice of genre. It is therefore not only through interference, but also through its relationship with the character that the literary landscape incorporates a metadiscursive aspect. The confusion between character and landscape even leads to the process of mythification. This is the case with landscape characters such as Garnier or the Lorelei. In Apollinaires' work, the Lorelei appears in two different forms. The poem Mirénal, which opens the Rénal section of Alphonse, suggests an opposition between, on the one hand, the real women who offer themselves to the poet's gaze, les filles blondes au regard immobile, aux nattes repliées, the blonde girls, and on the other hand, the fantastic figures dreamt up by the poet, themselves integrated into a discourse that is already literary. Écoutez la chanson lente d'un batelier qui raconte avoir vu sous la lune 7 femmes tordre leurs cheveux verts et longs jusqu'à leurs pieds. There is here a song within the poem, and the space is a poetical space. while the poem contrasts the difficult figures green hair, the color of cream, with real-life blonde woman, the Lopez becomes in the eponymous poem a blonde witch. Une sorcière blonde. Apollinaires' poem is built on the play of texts, with Apollinaire drawing inspiration not from highest poem, famous poem, but from the very first poem devoted to the Lorelei by Embargo, published in 1841. However, the blonde hair Apollinaire evokes in the first line of his poem, like the blue eyes, far from replacing the Lorelei in a Germanic reality, confuses her in the last line with the right-hand landscape when the poet evokes ses yeux couleur de mar, ses cheveux de soleil. So far from placing the literary text in a referential context, the landscape has a dereal lighting effect that gives its symbolic value. This function is most clearly seen in fantastic literature. We all know the famous scene in Stoker's Dracula, where Jonathan Harker's carriage enters the Carpathian forest. The novel describes a terrifying mountain landscape at nightfall, the famous passage that inspired two of the films derived from the novel, the Greenhouse 1922 film, Nosferatu, and then Francis Ford Coppola's film, Dracula's, after Bram Stoker in 1992. We can see how the landscape is linked to the process of derealization by the treatment of the gravity here in this scene. This is the marker. And the movement of the carriage is very strong. Yeah, you got it. But it's the way the movie tries to transpose the derealization of the landscape. And it is in black and white for and now a completely different choice from Francis Ford Coppola, with the same reflection on the gravity, but now it seems to be cloudy, very soft movements on cloudy grounds. So, Dracula's castle appears here in the background in almost human form, furthering the idea of identification between the character and the landscape. In a film which multiplies references, we cannot help but recognize both the form of the house of Usher. Before Stoker, Poe, also inspired by the English Gothic novel, had often his thought with a description of a disquieted landscape. During the course of the dark and soundless day of the autumn, in the autumn of this year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreaded tract of country, and at length found myself as the shades of the evening drew on within view of the melancholy house of Usher. The landscape, here associated with the narrator's eye and the idea of melancholy, provides a framework. It has a symbolic function. Through it, a link is established between nature and the supernatural. The belief in the form of the supernatural determines the form of nature. A dual relationship is thus established. For the representation of nature is conditioned by the representation of the supernatural and vice versa. This is the case in Goethe's Faust, where Faust invokes the spirits of nature, Erdgeist, in his letters. The spirit comes but refuses. And if the devil comes next, it is because Faust rejects the distinction between the microcosm and microcosm and macrocosm. But Goethe's tragedy presents a particular form of the hero's hybrids, the quest for infinite and therefore forbidden knowledge, a knowledge that, far from being the product of reason, comes from the irrational, from magic. Here, Goethe's character joins the 15th century historical figure of Faust, who served as the starting point for the myth and who had pretended to restore the lost comedies of Plautus and Terence by magic. In both cases, the figure of Faust merges with the very idea of literature in its state to embrace the totality of knowledge. Literature has sometimes taken on the mission of embracing the totality of human knowledge. Goethe even conceived a literary fiction as the figuration of a theory of knowledge. His great Bildungsroman, Wilhelm-Meisters Lehrjahre, Wilhelm-Meisters Apprenticeship, published in two volumes in 1795 and 1796, focused on the life formation of its young protagonist, who had just completed his theoretical training. The notion that structured the composition of his novel was therefore that of experience erfahrung, as conceived by Kant in his critique of pure reason. That which unfolds in space and time. This is Kant's definition of the experience. The transfer of Kant's philosophy of knowledge to novelistic fiction sheds light on Mikhail Bakhtin's famous notion of chronotope. According to this concept, space in fiction is the representation of the temporality, that of the character's maturation through experience. This relationship between the representation of space and the figuration of time gives the landscape in Goethe's novel its full meaning. The road and the river are chronotopes representing the knowledge acquired through experience, through what unfolds in both space and time according to the tension concept. In 1810, in his novel, 1809, sorry, in his novel, Electric Affinities, fiction drawing chemistry in proposing a reflection on the notion of electric affinities developed by the Swedish chemist Sorbonne Bergman. According to Bergman, bodies can repel each other as water and oil do, or attract and mingle as water and wine do. It is easy to see how Goethe might have drawn a novelistic composition of such a reflection. At the turn of the 18th to the 19th century, the novel was still defined by its sentimental subject, so Goethe transformed this chemical relationship between bodies to the level of human feeling and proposed that his novel be a reflection on the feeling of love as a determinism acting on the will. Is man free to choose his actions, or are they the object of a determinism that acts on the moral level in the same way as elective affinities as on the physical level? The comparison between bodies and the novel's four main characters is made explicit in book 4 of the novel, where Bergman's theory is the subject of a discussion between the characters. Goethe takes Bergman's case of attractional ability duplex, double electric affinity, as the model for his plot. The two double bodies, AB and CD, come together and, under the effect of a double attraction, recombine into AC and ED. The two couples in the novel, Charlotte and Edward, and the captain and Cordelia, are in the same situation. Before Goethe, a literary and philosophical enterprise had set itself the goal of embracing the totality of human knowledge. This was Diderot and Garnier's Encyclopedia, published between 1751 and 1772 in 17 volumes. It comprised 71,880 articles, dividing all human knowledge into 3 branches corresponding to the 3 human faculties: history, linked to memory, philosophy, the project of reason, and poetry, the project of imagination. However, the very metaphor of the branch associates knowledge with the speciality of a landscape, turning the cartography of knowledge to the image of the tree. The image has crossed the entire history of culture since Genesis, but the Bible specifically evokes the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, located next to the tree of life in the same part of paradise, both growing on the same form. This proximity means the proximity of knowledge to the activities of the human spirits, as well as the unity between morality and knowledge, between knowledge and life. The image of the tree, we gave ground to the encyclopedic project itself, presupposes a hierarchy of knowledge and an organic relationship between the different fields of knowledge. The whole formed a system. More than a century later, it was this system and even the very possibility of human knowledge assured of its truth that Flaubert would challenge in his very last novel, Bouvard et Pécuchet, which remained unfinished in 1880 at the death of its author. In one of the scenarios he took out of his novel, he takes up the image of the tree again, but in an eminently different form when he speaks of, I quote, making the tree of human knowledge, faire l'arbre des connaissances humaines. Two details will draw our attention. The adjective human is clearly opposed to the biblical perspective and associates the very idea of knowledge with that of a limit. Furthermore, the pure form of knowledge in French suggests fragmentation, far removed from the organic unity described by the encyclopedia. In fact, the novel is constructed as a journey to all the unrelated fields of human knowledge: agriculture, politics, history, literature, metaphysics, religion, science, and education. In his correspondence in January 1880, Flaubert claims to have read over 1,500 scientific books in preparation for his novel. The totalizing ambition of the two characters, characterized by their stupidity, is based on the fragmentation of knowledge, and the novel is built in the opposite direction to Goethe's Bildungsroman. The characters aim for purely theoretical knowledge, and far from learning from experience, they return again and again to their starting point, in a pattern that is the opposite of the chronicle structure. An opposition thus emerges between the encyclopedic project to embrace the totality of knowledge and reveal its profound organic unity, and the image presented by Flaubert's novel of fragmented, infinite, and above all, inaccessible knowledge. The function assigned to literature is thus radically different. Whereas in the age of enlightenment, literature was a means of embracing the source of knowledge. In the age of nascent positivism, and under the pen of Flaubert, who proposed a rewriting of the myth of Prometheus and Faust, it became a critique of knowledge and man's ambition to excess. And in the 19th century, specialization led to a fragmentation of knowledge, resulting in the age of suspicion witnessed by Flaubert. In fact, a few years before this novel, Débats published his essay Einführung in die Geisteswissenschaften, Introduction to the Human Sciences, where he divided the body of knowledge into natural sciences, sciences of the nature, and not human sciences, but sciences of the spirit, a division we still inherit today. In this machine, literature was excluded from the field of science. Between Diderot and Garnier on the one hand and Flaubert on the other, the paradigm for representing knowledge in landscape images changed. The tree representing organized hierarchical knowledge gave way to what Gilles Deleuze later called the rhizome, the pattern of knowledge that spreads out without order and hierarchy, escaping all control. The plant's metaphor remained, but verticality and structure gave way to horizontality and apparent disorder. In his Entretien avec Garnier, published in 1977, Deleuze emphasizes the literary implication of these two patterns, highlighting the significance of spatiality and movement in the aesthetic of the novel. In particular, he affirmed the superiority of the Anglo-Saxon novel over the French one as a literature of quest and movement. Does literature, thus conceived, lead to knowledge? Is it a search for knowledge? Does it describe man's quest? To answer this question, Deleuze defines the concept of line and deteriorization. To lead, he says, is to draw a line. Indeed, the first sentence of Melville's novel, Marty, is "We are gold." A sentence that can be understood in two senses, as if we consider the plot above the ship, or at a second level of initiation, the discourse that the author can address to the reader is also taking on a voyage into fiction. Deleuze then quotes Fitzgerald and takes up his notion of the clean break. The clean break draws a line from which there is no return. Crossing this line makes you a traitor. In Melville's 1851 novel, Moby, he cites the example of Captain Asher, guilty of having chosen Moby, the white whale in his hunting, against the law of the fisherman, for whom no whale should be hunted. Asher is an example of what Deleuze calls becoming. The plot of the novel is built around a way becoming of Captain Asher. According to Deleuze, the Anglo-Saxon novel is a novel of the traitor because, like time, it leads to a transformation that is the true meaning of displacement. Here, landscape takes on its true meaning. In Melville's previous novel, Marty, published in 1849, the narrative takes the form of a journey through islands that had sometimes just been discovered, such as Rababite Island, mentioned in 1834 in the Bulletin de la Société de Géographie, or rather introduced in 1822 by Louis Chiron in his Voyage pittoresque autour du monde avec les portraits des sauvages d'Amérique, to imaginary islands such as illicit islands, Plenary or Noria. This movement, that, like the description of exotic landscapes, transformed the novel from a narrative of exploration based on scientific knowledge to the pure fantasy of fiction. Deleuze contrasts the French novel of the Trader, represented by Melville, with the French novel more specifically represented by Flaubert, which is the novel of immobility, including metaphysical immobility. Flaubert's famous sentence, "La Bovary, c'est moi, la Bovary is me," is, in his view, I quote, hysterical cheater's sentence that has the tricheur hystérique. In the cheater's novel, which rejects all movement and forbids all becoming, the landscape has a radically different meaning to that attributed to it in the traitor's novel. On the contrary, it expresses both spatial and temporal immobility. At the end of their wanderings, Bouvard and Pécuchet revert to what they were 50 years earlier, copies. As for their move from Paris to Normandy at the start of the novel, it is ironically presented as a journey worthy of an adventure story. In Bouvard and Pécuchet, landscape description plays a different but equally important role. In preparation for writing his novel, Flaubert had made numerous trips to the Beauce and Red regions as early as 1873, before finding only in June 1874 the ideal location for the plot of his novel in Normandy, between Falaise and Caen. The landscape even merges with science, since the first of the sciences explored by the character is botanics. But the novel, which is built on the opposition between Paris and the space of Normandy, opens with a scene of urban landscape intended to tell the story of the two characters meeting in a parody of destiny represented by two Parisian avenues. L'un venait de la Bastille, l'autre du Jardin des Plantes. Quand ils furent arrivés au milieu du boulevard, ils s'assirent à la même minute sur le même banc. The staging of the meeting between two characters with such different physiognomies, but so similar in essence, is not lacking in comedy. But in the description of the Parisian setting, one detail catches the eye. Le canal Saint-Martin, étalé en ligne droite, son eau couleur d'or. The canal Saint-Martin spread its ink-colored water in a straight line. The ink is nothing other than that of literary fiction, and recall the inky taste of arsenic that Madame Flaubert takes at the end of Flaubert's other novel. In both cases, the reference to ink is a reminder of the power of authoriality. It is the author who decides the fate of his character, who gives color to the urban landscape. So, while Flaubert's literary trickster, in the form of profound pessimism, rejects the possibility of man attaining true knowledge, including through literature, it does posit the power of literature in the knowledge that is self-knowledge. Just as Socrates declared that we know only one thing, that we don't know anything, Flaubert asserts that literature can only deliver knowledge about itself. And this is undoubtedly the meaning of the literary landscape. Indeed, the landscape in literature frequently becomes a literary landscape. And whatever the divergence between Goethe and Flaubert in the relationship between and knowledge, Goethe's landscape also becomes a representation of the literary space formed by the work itself. The very iniquities of the elective affinities take place in the garden, a space which also designates that of fiction. The beginning of the novel introduces the reader to the work in progress. Edward, as we shall call, I will call the wealthy baron in the final of his life, had spent the best hours of an April afternoon in his nursery burying the grass he had just received on young plants. But this developing narrative already presents the reader with a framework, both spatial and temporal, sketching an image of the spring landscape. The gardener then answered Edward's question as to his wife's whereabouts in a dark enunciation that also presents the reader with an image of the landscape. I quote, the moss patch built against the rock face opposite the castle will be finished today. The view is excellent. Below us, the village, a little to the right, the church, whose steeple bearing rock will be opposite the castle and the gardens. The gardener continued his description, as if his interlocutor could not see the spectacle before him. Then, continued the gardener, the valley opens out to the right, and over the rich groves you can see pleasant distant views. The path up the rocks is beautifully laid out. The description of the landscape is then followed by an account of the character's journey, another occasion for a passage devoted to the landscape. He descended the terraces, examining the greenhouses and layers as he went until he reached the tree, and after crossing a small bridge at the point where the path divided in two branches towards the new alleys, he left the one which, through the cemetery, led fairly directly to the rock, to take the other, which on the left rose to a little further gently through a pleasant grove. End of quote. The landscape here is indicative of the position the novel adopts with regard to the epic narrative. Unlike Hercules, who chooses the more difficult path at the crossroads, Edward foregoes the rocky path to the cemetery in favor of a pleasant road. The image of the crossroads is then developed. At the point where the two paths meet, he sits down for a moment on a well-placed bench, then starts the climb forward. End of quote. Finally, at the moss path, Edward joins his wife. I quote, Charlotte received a husband on the threshold. This threshold is also the threshold of fiction, so that the landscape takes the form of a meta-discourse, setting out for the reader a reading fact that defines Goethe's literary projects. The second landscape scene implies Prince Friedrich von Homburg is the battle scene. Commentators have shown how glad an army man himself was inspired by Napoleon's battle in Vienna. But the play's interplay with literature is of a different order. The scene is seen from the point of view of the prince's army, which is at the top of the field with its back to the audience. This battle scene is observed and commented by the character of the play, but hidden from the audience by the reader. In a way, Christ creates a space in fiction for commentary on the dramaturgical debate about whether the battle scene should be staged and as in Shakespeare, or the object of a narrative as in classical French travel. By playing with the landscape, it has become a critical stage in fiction. He combines the two forms of dramaturgy, a synthesis that can also be read as ironic detachment. A few words in conclusion. In all these examples, most of which were chosen arbitrarily, landscape does not appear as a means of inscribing literary fiction in a referentiality. On the contrary, through intertextual interplay, it creates a purely literary space, drawing attention to the text specularity and its metatextual dimension. Through landscape, literature underlines its critical dimension and the relationship it establishes to knowledge. But this knowledge fails in any transitive dimension. The knowledge represented by the literary landscape is in fact associated with a critical reflection on the possibility of knowledge and can only result in a meta-discourse, that is to say, a reflexive movement of literature on itself. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you for this wonderful literary journey across different European landscapes where you have taken us. And now the floor is open for questions or comments. Thank you. Thanks. Next, we have to announce that
Okay.
Yeah. Which is the film adaptation. You start with the adaptation on Varela.
Yeah.
And it's probably before we began to talk about film adaptation and we've already taken the stage about film adaptation, but not only now the visual elements, because some of the examples you gave were theatre, and others were not theatre, but they were texts that have been adapted to the film. And I was wondering whether the visual elements, if you like, either or the possibility of performance or of screening actually change the dynamics of what you were talking about from the landscapes.
In the movie?
Or on stage.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you point out the problem that Murnau faced, in fact, because he didn't get the rights, because the novel, after Bram Stoker's death, had been sold for dramatic composition. So the novel has been pushed and paid and has been played everywhere in Ireland and in the United Kingdom. And then after the 20s, it went to the United States with the same subject. And Stoker's vow had sold the rights to this company. And in this company, there was what's the name of the Bela Lugosi in the United States. But Bela Lugosi first played the role of Dracula on the stage before he played the role of Dracula in the movie, in Todd Browning's movie, Dracula, the first film titled Dracula in 1930. Yes, so that's the problem of the stage. I think Murnau, the two examples that I gave Murnau's example and Topolas' example, the situation is different because when Murnau created this movie, the novel hadn't yet been transformed into a play. So he took just the novel and had this problem to transpose, to give it a transposition to a very long description. I didn't quote it because it's a long several pages, very long description of a landscape in evolution, because at the beginning the mountains are far and then they are threatening, and it's narrow and the clouds are heavy and the night is coming, and so the landscape is more and more threatening. So there is this evolution in a very poetic way. The description is done in a very poetic way in Stoker's novel, and it was not possible to transpose this into a movement. And the only captation of a landscape was not enough to create an impression what the text can do. So the problem that we now met was how to create an impression, how to install the subjectivity in a landscape which only appears on an image. And it was through the movement, but he had to create a break with the poetic way of Stoker, and chose to make something ridiculous, impossible, with this very quick movement, which and with the sound, which make the scene a little bit ridiculous. In the situation of Coppola, the situation of Coppola is really different, because it was 1992, after several decades, where Dracula became the topic of very light movies after Murnau's movie and Groupement movie. So he wanted to bring back the subject to the literary source, and he decided to come back to Murnau, but also to the text, and creating a very poetic atmosphere with this cloudy landscape where we don't see everything, and he creates an atmosphere where the glance is more present than the object of representation. Through the vapor that we see on the landscape, we see the glance of the character, which cannot see properly in the landscape. And the landscape appears as mysterious as in the castle, which appears later, where the analogy with a human body is in fact the impression of the character looking at the castle. It is not an objective representation of the castle. So in this situation, what the cinema has, the challenge the cinema has to face is to install into the camera an impression, a subjectivity. And this is the problem of everything. I can quote another example. In the novel, Stoker always says, for example, Dracula looked tall, he appeared to Jonathan like this, and never was. So how transpose looked, appeared to Jonathan, and so on? How to transpose it into a camera? He used the when you put the camera below, from down to up, because from down to up, you create the impression that the object of representation is taller than it actually is. This is the way that you know, and then we use also the shadow. We put the camera in front of the shadow of Dracula, rather than on the character on the body. So this is how the camera tries to create an impression. But all this shows that landscape is never an object, as you also said yesterday, but it's always it has always to be considered in relationship with a conscience or a subjectivity which considers it. Sorry for the long answer. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you very much for your talk. Much of what you trace out in the novel commission resonates with visual romance, landscape, realized as a bigger subject, Asper, architecture, a landscape that is ultimately or so I was just wondering whether you might reflect
About the medieval
romance.
romance. I think I've done you very well in this period of history of literature. What I tried to show in my examples is that in this representation of space or form, the landscape is transformed, a symbolic landscape, but it's also a literary part to the interpretation. And this is what I don't know about the medieval romance. If there are quotes inside, or if there is interpretation inside, because I think that when you refer to another text, then you also invites the reader to consider the comparison between your text and the model you transform. But I don't know how it is in the medieval romance. Sorry. This is why I took something very common, the text of the lake, which is very common, but everybody explains the biographical backside of the poem. But nobody speaks about the English lake, and it's a common place. The lake is a common place. So it's more. Of course, he was in front of the lake, the real lake, but he took this reality and linked it to a literary commonplace. Sorry.
For this enriching talk, I wanted to ask in relation to the situation in the landscapes and subjectivities, and you speak with the lesson. Speak more about pre-signifying subjectivities and landscapes, intensities and landscapes, things that are sort of like below subjectivities and conditions.
This is a very complicated question, of course, because the link between landscapes and subjectivities can be very different in the same text. If I go back to one of my examples, the landscape in the novel of Dracula, I try to show how the landscape represented the impression, the terrifying impression of the character of John, but also the landscape, the description of the landscape creates the confusion between this terrifying atmosphere taken from the textual reference, the Gothic novel. It's a definite Gothic novel, and Bram Stoker has told it. He said, "I'm writing a Gothic novel." So he created a confusion between the landscape and the character. As later, Francis Ford Coppola created an identification between the castle and the shape of the body of Dracula. So the link between landscape and subjectivity goes towards two directions. The one who looks, the subject, Jonathan, and the one who is looked at, Dracula. And this is really important in the whole novel because you can read the whole novel as a reflection about subjectivity and objectivity. A reading of Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation, which was translated, which has been translated into English in the same year as Bram Stoker has written his novel, 1997. And the idea is of Schopenhauer is that representation is an illusion because the presupposition is the distinction between the subjectivity, I, and an objectivity, what I look at. And this division doesn't fit to the reality of the world, which is unique. The whole novel that Stoker wrote can be read after this last book, because the narrative form is very complex. There is no line. It's a mixture of different kinds of documents. An article of journal, the journal of Jonathan Harker, the journal of Nina Harker, and so on. Writing from different origins. There is no narrator. So it's a crossing of different subjectivities. The only character who doesn't express subjectivity is Dracula, is only the author. So that you can read the novel as to consider Dracula only as the object of representation. And at the end, it disappears. It can mean that it only existed in the character's imagination. So, in my opinion, this novel is a novel about subjectivity, the question of subjectivity. No knowledge can erase without the subjectivity, which is its origin, but also which makes this knowledge an illusion, because it's something subjective. So, for me, the novel is the critique of knowledge through the study. Yes.
So yeah. I think it's probably a follow-up on the previous question and perhaps a connection with Brigitte's talk. Thinking about the examples she gave us, it seems that in the kind of literature she has been talking about, there is a different kind of interaction between the subjectivity and objectivity that you've been talking about. There is perhaps there's a mute history of the object, of the landscape, and a mute consciousness of the object that is emerging and interacting with the subjective consciousness. And this is, I mean, this ties in with the logical concerns she has introduced, because the pre-subjective, pre-historical, if you like, consciousness that is brought to us, that is carried in the landscape with which we are interacting, and on which we have the tendency, the anthropocentrism that she was talking yesterday, we have the tendency to project our own will, our own determination, our own consciousness. So I was wondering whether you wanted to speak to that at all.
Thank you. It's a good question. Of course, Brigitte and we treated two different aspects of the relationship between subject and the landscape. Brigitte started with the perception and continued with the dependence. That is to say, there is no nature, no landscape in itself. It's only a nature for me as a living being, because I need it. And it's not the same as the perception, what was her starting point. For life, great for life, what was really interesting, going from the perception to the dependence. And this led to the idea that literature has disengaged defense position. So it has a positive attitude towards action. In the examples that I gave, because there is, even if there is no action, give to the reader the idea that you must. So literature is aimed to the action. In my examples, literature is not aimed to action, but it criticizes the possibility of knowing. So it's a look on itself as a glance with the mirror to criticize my conscience of being able to take into consideration an object, landscape. I'm a self, and the landscape is the object for me. And this situation is the object of a critic in the text that I quoted. So I think the two lectures show different aspects of literature. One aims to the action, the other one as critics. I don't know if I answered the question.
And then just before I close, it's a very good comment. So I was actually thinking about saying the environmental issues. And I was thinking what you were saying and what you were saying. Because the inscription, the literary inscription is performed on the students, people on the landscape and onto the sort of material medium to be used, whether it's a text, poetry, or a movie. The key would be, if we want it to be all the way around, we want the landscape to be described in us. That would be that would be along the lines of non-symbolic Italian approach, maybe like Christianity for Italians, the idea of with the rhythm and things that are free language, like gesture, rhythm, and so on. But we discuss it. We discuss it. Thank you. Thank you.
And then we have